We're now working on de la Riva guard. So that's where I've got my foot on the outside of his leg, and I can either be using a hook or my knee pressuring in. I'm usually gripping the ankle, and my other leg is free, so it's not trapped in between the legs, it's free. So there's a few options we have from de la Riva. I can work towards the berimbolo, which is where I start to get an angle, work to try and get Ed's hips down to the mat, and then once his hips are on the mat, we'll show an option to come on top just to try and get up from here if you don't like the berimbolo, but probably the best option from here is to try to spin through and look to take the back. So that's our first option, and that's us getting around the corner, sort of circling around towards our opponent's back, towards getting the berimbolo. Circling the other way, or when our opponent's following us and facing in, we can start to look towards the waiter. Okay, so I can either go towards reaching, I want to reach towards the far leg, which can get me to either X guard, or if he drops down to his knee, which is very common, that gets us into the waiter guard position. Our last option is to work towards the shallow K guard, or the K guard position. So that's where we're going to be reaching to the back of the knee, underhooking the leg, retracting our leg into this shallow K guard position, which can allow us to then start to shoot through into 50-50 and attack the backside 50-50. So I actually didn't used to play much de la Riva in no-gi. I played de la Riva and berimbolo in the gi for quite a long time, but I always thought that didn't really translate very well towards no-gi. So I kind of looked more towards single X and some of the other guards that translate well whether you're playing gi or no-gi. But more recently, the last couple of years, I've started to see that you can actually play the de la Riva and the berimbolo game in no-gi. It just requires a slight adjustment in your grips to be able to make it work. So I actually find it very effective nowadays, but you just need to be doing it the right way and make the correct adjustments. So this is a very quick look at one of the major differences between gi and no-gi in playing de la Riva, and that's our ability to control posture. So in the gi, you have the ability to grip the lapel, potentially the belt here. And when you grip that, I can stop Ed from being able to posture up, and that can let me use that to off balance and move him around. In no-gi, you really don't have any ability to control that posture. I see people trying to grip the arm as a replacement. This doesn't really work, and it's very transient. He can really strip that grip very quickly. So I don't even really bother trying to grip the arm like that. We have to then more focus on just gripping around the leg and the movement and trying to get around the corner in slightly different ways. So we're going to be placing a bit more emphasis on putting our feet on the ground and gripping around the leg to try to off-balance our opponent, compared to what you would do in the gi, where you'd be gripping the up at the lapel or the belt a lot of the time. There are some advantages to it being no-gi as well, though. I mean, Ed could be gripping my pants. Obviously, we can't do that because we're in no-gi, but if he simulates gripping my pants, it can be much harder to break that than a grip with his hand. If he grips with his hand, it's much easier for me to strip and move and pummel against that compared to a pants grip. And also grips like lapels and stacking and pressuring in, like he can't get a good grip on my upper body, so it's hard for him to anchor himself to me, and so it's easier for me to actually get these angles and fight around. So I find the retention side of things is a lot easier in no-gi. So the way we're going to break this up, this section on de la Riva, is into first just going through some general concepts and positioning, so like how I want the pressures from my leg and what kind of I want to use my de la Riva hook and my limbs to attack. And then we'll go into some individual techniques. So we talked about the berimbolo, or getting the hips to the mat and going for the berimbolo. Okay, we're going to teach that as almost like a linear sequence. That's going to be first. That's usually the first thing you go for. You're trying to get an angle. You're trying to get your opponent's hips to the mat. So we're going to go through that, right through a few different phases of that. And then we will come back and go through waiter, and lastly, the shallow K guard entries as well. So in reality, if Ed just faced a little bit more, in reality, at the initial point, at this point, I kind of got those three options available now. I can go towards de la Riva, I could be going towards waiter, or I could be going for shallow K. So in terms of, obviously, like at the initial part when I've got De La Riva, I want to actually be mixing between these three options, but I'm going to teach it first as almost like a singular option. We're single-minded trying to get the hips down to the mat. Later on, towards the end of this De La Riva section, you should start to see that, like, how to fight this initial battle between the wader and coming back towards the bolo and try to mix these things together. Now this section on De La Riva, we're getting the hips, we're going to be working, a lot of it is going to be working to get the hips to the mat, and then we're going to cover in quite a lot of detail how we would search for the berimbolo from once we get the hips to the mat to try to take the back. It's not a series on the berimbolo, there's a lot more a lot more counters we could cover, but it is quite in depth about how I approach actually making sure that stage of getting to the berimbolo position is done well. So just be aware, if you don't want that as part of your game, I will show you a way to just get up. You can still use this entry to getting the hips to the mat and then just try to get up on top. But I do go in quite a bit of depth to how to kind of fight for the berimbolo position. Because I think that's, if you're going to use this game and you want to be looking for the berimbolo, you need to make sure you hit these points right. Learning to berimbolo can be quite tricky. It's a difficult movement, and I think one of the best ways to start learning it is actually to do the rolling back take. So I'm going to teach the rolling back take from on top, and that's a good intro to then what's happening with the berimbolo, because the berimbolo is actually just a rolling back take starting from the bottom but getting into this position. So what you're going to do is you're going to have your opponent's top leg folded across their body like this. Okay, so I've folded Kaya's leg past. I'm going to put my knee between his legs. So the top leg's past the bottom leg, and my knee is in between that gap. All right. My right leg is then going to come in front of the hip. So I'm basically going to pinch this leg between my legs here. All right. So this means I've now started to, imagine I want to take the back. This would be my top hook on the back. I'm already getting that now. Okay, so I'm putting my top hook in for the back. Even though I don't really have his back yet, I will later. Okay, so again, you're just going to fold your opponent's top leg past their bottom leg. This can happen as you try to pass the guard, or even from side control. Sometimes you work to fold their leg across, and we step our knee in between, our outside leg. Now comes pinching the knees between my legs. Okay, so I want to make sure I've scooped up the legs nice and good here. I now roll over my right shoulder. So it's Kaya's right leg, my right shoulder, okay? So this shoulder here, okay? As I do that, you'll see I keep my legs tight, and this is going to start to expose Kaya's back and allow me to take the back. As we look at that second part, so I'm rolling over my right shoulder, I want to make sure that I keep a good tight wedge here. So see my leg here is below the line of the knee, not out near the foot. Okay, if it's at the foot, he's got too much freedom. I want to capture his knee with my knee. So curling in above the line of the knee, not even here, okay, below the knee. My right foot is actually really important. This is going to pinch in. So my right leg pinches in, okay. Imagine you almost want to step both feet down next to your opponent's armpits. This is a great way to think of it at first, okay. So the most common mistake people do, they put their feet away. They're trying to turn their opponent, but their opponent's hips drop like Kaya's did here. His hips drop between us. I can't get access to his back. I need to elevate his hips with a wedge. So I put my feet both down. So you see my left leg's doing most of the work. My right leg's really just planted, and that lifts his hips as I'm trying to stomp my feet down right next to his armpit, very close to his body. Okay. The other thing to do is not face your opponent. If I look towards Kaya, I allow his hips to drop again. I actually want to, if anything, face away. I'm doing a little bump with my hips out this way. If I look this way and turn my hips this way, look at how high I've lifted his hips up. It's exposed the back. Okay. Look at this from another angle now. So you'll see the knee wedging in next to the hip, the other leg coming over the knee. I'm going to stomp my feet down, exposing the back here. You can see as I turn my hips away, it drags Kaya's body towards me. It's giving me his back. Even though I'm looking this way, his back's become close. Right? From here, I can reach under the head, reach under the arm. And now, if you look, that leg that I said becomes a hook. So that's already jammed in, okay? It's already jammed in. I just need to put my foot over. I've got my bottom hook, top hook, and I've taken the back. So again, the rolling back take, great way to start to learn the berimbolo. I'm going to trap Kaya's leg between my legs. I'm going to reach to his hip, roll over my right shoulder, keeping my right knee and thigh tied against the hip here. Okay. As we go through, I'm going to start to keep that pinch tight. Don't let my knee move away, so don't do this. I keep my knee tight as my feet stomp underneath the armpit. Okay, this exposes the back. I turn to face away, keeping that pressure. I start reaching for my grips, put my bottom hook in, hip out, top hook in, and I take the back. Now talking about the de la Riva positioning, probably the most important thing to get right as you start. Okay, so what I don't want to happen with this is a very common mistake, but I don't want to allow Ed to pin my leg down to the ground here like this. Okay? So this is not really a useful de la Riva hook if I'm playing from here. What I want is my knee up near Ed's knee line like this. Okay. So I can actually use my hook in two ways. I say hook. I can use de la Riva in two ways, or this leg. I'm mostly at first actually not going to be looking for a hook. If you look for the hook when I'm front on to Ed, and I try and get a hook, push my leg down Ed, you can pin that leg. Okay. What I want to do here is close this space off, make my knee facing the roof. I'm cutting back with my leg, and I'm actually putting pressure to straighten Ed's leg and turn it in a little as well. So I'm starting to actually almost put pressure to expose his back. It rarely happens that he actually turns due to this pressure, but I'm using my knee, closing it up, having it vertical, pushing it away, so that direction, as well as a little bit inwards with my foot curling in as well, okay? So if Ed tries to push my knee down now, because it's vertical, it's very hard to push it down to the ground. As soon as I look for the hook here, you see that space open, and he can start to push that down to the ground. So we're looking with usually at first, and the most common mistake is people are trying to hook immediately. When I have a bit of an angle, now I can get my hook, and I can still keep my knee pretty vertical. So try and strip that now, Ed. See my knee's quite vertical here. I'm feeling pretty good with that hook. Okay, so when I have the angle, I can use my de la Riva hook quite well. Right? But it's front on to the leg or too much centered, trying to get the hook usually exposes too much. Once I have my angle and I get my hook, I want there to be very little space where the hook is. So can you see here, if Ed tries to peel off any space or peel this foot off here, it's reasonably stuck. It's hard for him to get underneath. So a very common mistake is people start doing things like this. Here it's very easy if you just push down on that leg, Ed can clear that hook. Okay, so by instead of trying to reach as far through as you can or as high as you can necessarily, often a shallow hook can be better as long as that space is gone. So I actually kind of put the top or outstep of my foot against the leg. I point my knee upwards, and I'm actually pulling my knee towards my chest. I'm pulling back. If you notice, if I push my knee towards Ed, it starts to give space. If I pull my leg backwards, I can keep that tight. My toes are coming back and it's hooked in tightly. My knee's pointing up. The more I point my knee up, the more it turns Ed away from me or gives me an angle to turn away from Ed. Okay, so try and obviously, if he gets enough time, he'll be able to strip my foot. You can push my foot as well. It's kind of hard to get at. He'll eventually get it, but it's not just floating out in the open like this. Okay, so we're going to be, when we get our angle, We want to make sure that we get a shallow hook. See my knee actually retracting back a little bit. Once it's hooked in, once I get my foot stepped on the inside of the thigh, I am pressuring my knee inwards to point it up towards the roof, keeping that pressure as I will start to get my angle. Notice even here, as I'm getting around, this knee being closer to my chest here, not extending out in a way. So just again, looking from this angle, as I get around the corner, my knee will retract a little bit, hook, and my knee points up like so. So I have a good hook, knee, vertical, hard to, so if you try and push this knee down now, Ed, that should be very difficult to do compared to being opened out like that, where it can be stripped. So now, once Ed starts pushing down, if I have a De La Riva hook and I did it wrong, he starts pushing down, you should, earlier than this, recorrect it. Right now, it's too late, okay? But if we go back, if he starts pushing, I realize that's wrong, I want to turn my knee in. Forget about the hook, turn the knee in and pressure like that. So when Ed tries to push now, he can't. If I get my angle, that's good, and I got good positioning. But if I start to mess up, I let go of my hook and go back to pushing in, always wanting to keep my knee high and close to his knee. This is the main type of control that we want. If we do get a push down, so he does actually manage to push down to here, usually we're thinking about retention, framing, getting our foot back, and then starting to get back to De La Riva later. Okay. In terms of your hip position with your De La Riva hook, usually I want my hip pretty close to the ankle. The more I move my hip away, the more my knee turns out and I start exposing the inside of the knee to be pushed down. Okay, so I tend to want to be pretty close. Over the top can be good, but I often lose a bit of grip with my hand when I do that. Okay, having my hip just on the inside of the ankle to pressure, I can get a good pull with my arm and also a push with my leg, and I can be like a little deeper with my hips here. When I start going over, I become a little shallower in my positioning. So just dropping inside the foot a little bit, to me, is the best position, especially early on, to apply good pressure and allow me to get my angle. Talking about my free leg or the non-De La Riva leg, what am I trying to do with that? Let's look first, what do I not want to happen? I don't want Ed to step over this leg and settle his hips on. Okay, now it's trapped between his legs. We're in the headquarters position. This, to me, means I need to be not thinking about De La Riva anymore and be thinking about guard retention. Okay, so we don't want this to happen. There's some things we can do as he's going to do that, but let's look back a little bit on making that difficult to do. So two things. I either have my foot back and floating. So if you look at my foot, if it's back kind of past the line of my hips, if you've got the flexibility to do that, which means pulling your knee back and also externally rotating a little bit. Okay. So if I keep this here and I keep good pushing pressure with my De La Riva, try and step over my leg, get to headquarters, go. I don't know if you can see that. Sorry. So if Ed goes to step over the leg, you see my foot stays in front. Okay, it's very hard and he's really committed his weight. So in reality here, I've got plenty of opportunity to actually capture his legs and so on. The issue comes when I'm stretching out. Okay, if I start stretching out, if I'm trying to step on his leg, for example, here, or try to hook his leg and stretch my knee very far away from my chest, you want to go to headquarters now, Ed. He doesn't have to do much. He doesn't give me access to his legs. This is a problem. Okay, and now I'm stuck. I need to go back to retention. So if we go back, don't stretch your leg out too far. Okay, you can hook that leg, and we will be like working some ways to work to weight by doing that, but do it when it's close and don't stretch too far away. Another place I can put this leg, and this is very common, especially when I'm looking to do, actually the berimbola or the waiter is just past the hip here. So I kind of step up and I put my ankle tight to the hip. This can help actually trying to like pull Ed forward and knock his weight a little bit this way. But also the fact that I'm just past the hip and locked on here, Ed can't immediately step on that. He actually has to step backwards. He has to give me a bit of an angle. So he has to give me an angle to push the leg down and try and step over. So try to just step over from where you are. Okay. You can see his own leg gets in the way. It's not going to happen. So I'm kind of forcing him to give me an angle if he wants to beat my leg, and that can let me start to get my angle, start trying to get his hips down to the mat. So we can have our foot here. It can also be useful to lift my hips. I can use it, we'll have a look at this later, but that leg can help me lift, turn, and get an angle this way. I'm also ready to hook the leg if he were to step over. So if Ed does go to step over, I can off balance him, and this gives me great access to the waiter. So there's some other things we will do with this leg. We will be putting it on the ground. We're going to be kicking the stomach. There's a lot of things, especially when we get into the berimbolo scenario. But for now, usually when we're just front on, it's either staying back, pummeling, so Ed's trying to grip the leg and I'm often trying to circle, or right next to the hip, like so. Okay. I don't so much go to the bicep from De La Riva. I find from here, without a postural control like you have in the gi, Ed can always clear and then control, and I've usually taken my knee a bit too far away from the chest. If he came very close to me, I might be happy to go here, but if he moved back, I'm not going to follow. Okay, I'm going to keep it back. Let's talk about my body positioning. Generally, I'm actually seated up a lot of the time. Okay, I'm not as mobile when I'm flat on my back like this. It's harder for me to turn and move. I'm often playing De La Riva here. Okay, so I'm kind of often either up on my hand like this, or I'm up and I'm pulling myself up with the hand here. Okay, so from here I can spin and turn the corner a lot better, and I can off balance quite well, just shifting side to side like this, as opposed to when I'm flat, where I'm a bit slower, and I often give more gaps for things like underhooks. I want to be pretty much constantly moving towards the back. That's like the default thing I'm doing. And then I can react off that. So it's not a static position. I'm not sitting here in De La Riva waiting for something to happen and then trying to react. I need to be forcing the reaction by constantly be moving around to the side. And we'll go through some ways of doing this, because there's some other different ways we approach this. I'm moving towards the back, and then things come off that reaction. If Ed starts to follow and try to stop me getting around towards the back, then I can start to come the other way and go for waiter. Otherwise, I keep going and I keep either bringing him to the mat or start moving towards the back itself. Okay, so it's not really a static position. We want to be moving around. If they do a very good job at making you static, so Ed kind of manages to control legs and sticks the position really well, usually he's quite static himself then, and that's a great time to start looking for the shallow K-guard and look to enter towards the backside 50-50. There's a few different things I can use for a grip with my left hand. I can be gripping the ankle. I could have a deep overhook, or I can be underhooking. Okay, so a lot of people that play no-gi De La Riva will play from underhook De La Riva. At the moment, I don't look for this too often, unless I'm looking for the K-guard entry in particular, the shallow K-guard. I'm often playing from here. I guess the issue when you go for the underhook, a lot of the time, we'll talk about how you can potentially do it in a different way, but often when I look for the underhook, I start to turn myself on my side. So if Ed wants to push my shin down now, so push that to the ground, I can get stuck in a position like this. Okay, so it's often quite difficult. We'll show a way to do this, but a lot of time when you look for this underhook, I'm turning to my left as I reach for that, so I'm giving an opportunity for Ed to push the leg down. So that will, if I do it like that, it will negate my ability to go to something like waiter. I can't, while I'm facing this way, get any good access to waiter guard, okay, or at least like force the position. Okay, I want to be able to put pressure into his knee with my knee for something like that. Okay, so whereas if I keep the ankle grip, I can be pressuring the knee and going out. There is a way we can get the underhook and go for waiter, and that's only if we can keep our knee straight. So I would have to be pressuring, keep our knee up. I would have to be pressuring and create just enough of a gap. So if I can push his knee, not just back, but a little in, there's often just enough of a gap that I can reach to the knee and then underhook without compromising my knee position. This is good if you can get it, and it's kind of a safe way to look towards waiter, as you'll see a bit later, because it's hard for Ed to counter me with an underhook when I do this. So now I'm pressuring his knee and I can start to still stretch him out and enter towards waiter. Okay, so ideally when going for the underhook, If we want to go to the underhook, we keep our knee up and we use it to pressure them in, curling back with our foot to reinforce that pinch. And you can see that opening. I can underhook without giving up space. Whereas if I'm a little more hips out, which is common to underhook, then expect them to either push that down, or if you're early enough, you can start going towards the shallow K and the 50-50 entry. Generally, the deep overhook is going to be better than just the grip on the ankle, but it's a sign we're going for the bowler. When you've committed to this, usually it's a sign we're really getting around the corner and trying to attack the bowler. We can have a similar issue. It is possible to get the waiter again from here, from this deep overhook, but often my knee gets turned out and it gets ability to push down, okay? Because I've started to commit my whole body and turning to that side, whereas I get a little more square and pushing. It can be better a lot of times better to enter the waiter that way.
All right, so we're going to look at positioning of the de la Riva and my body, and just some of the main controls we're looking to do from the de la Riva position. So we'll look at the de la Riva hook, the free leg, my body and hip positioning, and also how I'm gripping the leg. Once I get the de la Riva, you can see my opponent here is pushing on my knee. I don't want it to be so opened out. Okay, so if I can, I want to get my knee more vertical. There we go. Okay, so you can see the change, pointing my knee up and pushing back against the knee. I have much better positioning with my de la Riva leg. So if you can't get the hook, it would probably be dangerous to be going for the hook here, because David here could push my leg to the ground. So I'm focusing on that knee pressure while I'm gripping the leg, and see my outside foot trapped against the leg, making it hard to step over. He would have to step back. If he goes to step back, I'm going to try and take my angle at that point in time. Okay. So in this case, just beforehand, we'll go about my hips. So my hips are just on the inside of the leg, and I'm able to come up, crunch my body in, and get a shallow de la Riva hook. So I want to have my knee nice and close to my chest here as I start to get my angle. We'll talk about how to get the angle a little more later. All right. And that's able to help me to get around. So you can see this leg was hooking right next to the leg all the way through. So alternating your de la Riva leg between pushing and, when you start getting the angle, to getting a de la Riva hook. Is another example of using the hook, and again having my foot to the outside of my opponent's body here. And you can see I've got my de la Riva hook now on my left foot. You can see it poking through there, reasonably shallow on the leg here. Okay, so not looking for a deep hook just yet. And using that to get the angle. You can see my change in the grips. I've gone from a grip on the ankle at first. If we just watch that again. So I hold the ankle, and as I get a bit deeper around, okay, now I'm getting a good overhook on the leg, which is just going to be a tighter grip and harder for my opponent to regain the angle. In this scenario, you can see I'm putting my right foot on the ground. So I go from recovering, I take de la Riva and I use my foot on the ground, and that's going to help me get around the corner. So I tend to want to have that foot out of being able to grip into a good range. You can see my hand reaching to the leg, and I'm sitting up, getting a good deep overhook of that leg as I get a good angle. Okay, and that lets me to spin through and look towards the berimbola, or to come up on top.
Looking at entries to de la Riva. Okay, so we'll first go from when I'm seated and how I can try to look and enter into de la Riva, and then if I'm actually on my back. So there's like offensive entries, there's also entries. A lot of the time we get to de la Riva when we're on our back, retaining guard, and we can work back into the de la Riva position from there. So obviously I can't get de la Riva if Mish is not standing, or at least standing on one leg. So we need to make sure
that we're going through at the right spot. If you've got a kneeling opponent, you need to threaten something else, usually K-guard, and then they will often start putting one leg up, and that will give you a chance to go for de la Riva. So the first entry, we're just going to go, Mish is going to have one leg forward. Usually people will stand one leg forward and one leg slightly back. And we're going to assume that he's reasonably upright. So I've actually just got immediate access towards this leg. How do I work to get de la Riva from here? All right. Two main entries from here. I either lead with my hand gripping the knee first, or I lead with my hand gripping the ankle first. Both of these are fine. I'd probably say the one gripping the knee is a little more risky in that I expose the chance for Mish to step in and look for underhooks a little bit more. So I have to kind of give a little bit of space, more so than when I reach for the ankle, where I get to keep a bit tighter structure with my legs. All right. So reaching for the ankle, I'm going to fall to the side, and I keep my knees tight to my chest as I reach towards the ankle here. As I'm reaching, I'm going to roll onto my side, lift my hips, and shoot through. Okay. So you can see I don't really give up this structure here. I don't reach and then extend. I stay tight. I fall to the side. My hips come up in the air and shoot through. So there's never a gap here for Mish to come in and start to pressure. And I've got a good chance to get my hook set. Okay. So again, we're here. I see an avenue for the ankle to be available. I reach not from the inside of my leg like this, but on the outside of my leg. So I keep my knee tight to my chest, falling and shooting my hips in like so, staying tight. Or I can reach for the knee first here. This is the other option. Knee first with my right hand, and I pull myself in towards the de la Riva hook. Like so, okay. Again, here. Going to reach to the knee, pull myself onto my left side and try and shoot my hip close to Mish's leg as I grip onto the leg to stop him retreating and get a good angle on my de la Riva. All right. So again, those two options. It might depend on what's available, how far forward you are relative to your opponent. But we have going to the outside, to the ankle and shooting the hips. And we have reaching to the knee and shooting the hips. With that second one, a little kind of hip escape with your foot touching the ground. So you'll see I'll reach and my foot here will kind of scoot me through, and then I retreat that leg so Mish can't control it. With Mish standing here, if he's got access to the leg, I can go for these ones where I reach for the leg. But a lot of the time he's going to be low with his body. So he might still be standing, but he's kind of leaning forward, ready to block my legs. Okay. And if I try to do one of these entries, he's really going to block my shins and ability to attach to de la Riva. So if you see again, if I go for the entry, I end up jammed like so. And this is no good. Okay. So we tend to do that if he's high and if he's tall. So kind of posture up. Yeah, if he's here, now I can shoot through nice and easy. But when he's leaning forward, I'm not going to do that. So when he's leaning forward, I want to start trying to take a 2-on-1 and get upper body control. Okay, the counter, even if in nogi it's not a huge threat, but I can threaten some sort of upper body attack, like a triangle, or even threaten close guard. The counter is for Mish to step a leg forward. Okay, so what we're going to do, if I take 2-on-1, so I can grab the elbow and wrist, sometimes even just two hands on a wrist like so. Can be even better sometimes if we grab with our elbows down as opposed to with our elbows up. But my preference would probably be a 2-on-1 gripping the back of the elbow. I'm trying to separate the elbow from the knee. And when I do this, I'm going to fall to my back, shooting my feet over the top onto the biceps, like this. Okay. The reason I go over is it's very hard for Mish to control my legs. If I shoot from under to control my leg, he blocks and now he gets into position. Could be this leg, but he blocks that leg. Okay. When he tries to block my leg as I shoot over, it's very difficult to stop my feet from landing on the biceps. And he should feel an immediate threat now that if he doesn't put his knee to his elbow, so go back, keep it open, that I take my foot, put it on the hip, and I can start attacking some sort of upper body attack. Okay, so if I go from here, double bicep, towards the hip, Mish is usually going to then start posturing up or putting his elbow to his knee to block that space. Okay, he blocks that space. I can't shoot the triangle, but what I can do is get my de la Riva hook. So he's gifted me that. That's the defense to an open guard upper body attack is usually to put your leg forward and you give your opponent the de la Riva hook. So again, we control the near side arm, the lead arm. I'm going to fall back, circling over the top to both biceps. And then I'm going to start looking for the hip. If it's available, we go for upper body attacks. Usually he starts to lean back or step forward, giving me the de la Riva hook. And then I'm into de la Riva, ready to attack. Against a kneeling opponent, we can try to make, obviously we can attack other things, like K-guard would be the obvious one, at least as a threat to make him stand up, and then we can take de la Riva from there. So two things I'll cover here. One is often when I start putting my foot on the outside, knee on the inside, and I start trying to pull forward to get under this leg, a lot of the time Mish will put his, put your other leg up, his other leg up in the way to try to block me having, put it forward, to block me having access to this leg. So it kind of stops my hips getting into that side, but because he stepped up on this leg, I can switch hips and take de la Riva on the far leg. Okay, so again, if I can pull his butt off his heels, as I do this, he often will step up. I can now pendulum from my right leg, hook, and take a de la Riva hook. Sometimes you get someone who will just sit on their heels, and no matter what you do, they won't. Like you can't get their weight forward like this, okay? When this is the case, I'll put one foot tight next to the hip, and the other foot will try to wedge in this gap between his butt and his heel, and I'm actively curling through here. So if at any point he steps up on this leg, I'm ready to take that hook, right? Now, as I do that, I'm going to slowly start moving myself around the corner, okay? And at a certain point, stay on your heels, sorry. At a certain point, I start getting around enough that I'm starting to get to his back. All right, let's turn a bit. So what usually happens as you start getting an angle here is Mish will start to try to turn to face me, and to do that, he has to step up on his leg. It's kind of hard to, if you try and follow me on your knees, Mish, I still make a good angle relative to him. The only way to really follow me at a good speed is to step up, and now I have my de la Riva hook. So in summary, when someone is on their knees, we look to get our hips to the side and look at the K-guard section for our main attacks we've got from here, but we're just discussing the de la Riva options. Hipping out, getting a knee one side, foot to the other. I'm going to start trying to bring Mish forward. If he brings his knee upwards to block that, then I start to pendulum onto my other hip and I take de la Riva. If he stays seated back and I cannot get him forward, I'm going to start putting my foot, curling it between the heel and the butt here. I'm going to start moving, sitting up, moving to the side, and as he reacts, I get my de la Riva hook, or I just keep moving towards the back.
So if you happen to be on your back, you can often look to catch an ankle, and then that will set you up to de la riva. Obviously you have to be comfortable with your guard retention, and one of the key things here is I don't want to have my feet stretched out, because here Mish can grab my legs without having any threat of me gripping his. I want to make sure my feet are pummeling and high like this. So if Mish wants to control my legs, he starts to step forward. Okay? See, I've got his ankle now. Okay? So in order to try to control my legs, he's starting to come forward. I get his ankle, and then I can start putting my foot to the outside of his knee, pressure with my knee, turn the angle, and start to get de la riva. Okay? And this can happen quite proactively, where here I'm moving around, I get the ankle, and I get de la riva. This is a very common way to do it. I wouldn't recommend falling to your back and doing that first proactively. I recommend being forward and trying to attach, but if Mish happens to push me back and we're on the defense, then that's often a great time to set up our de la riva.
Let's have a look at entries into de la riva, and probably just the main thing I'll say about this is, in a lot of this footage, some of it's from seminars, and I've been working a lot of guard retention, so a lot of it's coming off guard retention in open guard where I'm getting into de la riva, but you get an idea of how we can. So I guess what I'm saying is it's a little more of I'm tending to pay a little more of a passive entry style, whereas I think you can definitely be a bit more aggressive and reaching for the legs from a sit-up guard a little bit more. Okay, so there's a few different ways. Very often I'm attempting to attack against someone who's kneeling or in combat base, and it's forcing them up out of a kneeling position into standing on one leg, which is the combat base. And when I attack one side, that'll often give me a chance to then attach to de la riva on the free legs. This is a very common way of entering. Actually, in this scenario, my opponent is going for a leg lock, so that gives me a chance to then take my left foot and become a de la riva hook here. But that's more from a seated position, a less common one. All right, so you'll see here from K guard, knee comes up. I'm going to control the arm, and then I can start attaching to de la riva on the free leg. So I get my de la riva from their knee coming up to defend a K guard entry. That's very common. And again, we want to be putting this in context. When our opponent is kneeling, we want to attack towards K guard. It's when, or potentially get an angle towards de la riva, but it's when they're standing up on one leg that's much more likely that de la riva is going to be effective. Okay, so in this case, the entry, looking for attachment to the leg, and my opponent stood up on that leg, and I was able to catch that de la riva hook immediately. So very common, your opponent's going to look towards for a headquarters position. So let's look here. Gripping onto my legs. As soon as I grip my legs, I tend to want to be on my back so I can keep my feet in front. Okay, so I was seated, but I want to fall back so that I can actually pummel against those hands. And see my opponent steps in here to try to step over my leg, grabs my leg, wants to step over into headquarters. That allows me to grip that leg they stepped with, and then force my knee up into the de la riva position and start playing from de la riva. This is a great example of keeping those legs high if you are on your back. So this supine entry, so I've got my feet back and high. Okay, see both feet above that line. Being careful not to get stacked here, but it's forcing for my opponent here to control my legs. He really has to step in close, and when he steps in close, that means I can start. Obviously, I retain my guard first. I keep my feet back. I'm working on guard retention, and then I see an angle as he starts to pressure in to start to attach to a leg. Here we go, and now I've gripped the leg with my left arm. Okay, so kind of working that retention as they come in to try to get some offense going. It's a great time to attach to the leg, and then work to set up your de la riva. In this one, there's an example. In this one coming up, there's going to be an example of using the upper body to set up the lower body. So here I've I'm on my back. I managed to take control of of the arms. Having that 2-on-1 on the arm means my opponent Sam here really wants to try and keep this space close, or he wants to step forward with this leg to prevent his arm being separated too much. And as he steps forward, he keeps that leg forward, tries to peel a de la Riva hook, but I'm able to grip onto the leg as he does. So by going for the arms, it often exposes that entry of the legs into the de la Riva position. And here's an example from seated, falling to the side as my opponent steps in. So as Steve steps in here, have a look in a moment. So I'm in the seated position here. I'm trying to hand fight. And then often with the hand fight, your opponent will step in. That can be a great time to fall down and grab that ankle. So I want to get a grip on the outside of my leg on the ankle. So we'll see here, Steve steps in, and I'm going to fall down to the side, gripping onto that ankle. Okay, and that gives me my angle and a good de la Riva positioning to start to try to attack.
Alright, we're now going through the linear sequence for the berimbolo, we're covering the berimbolo, which is going to be, we'll teach it in 4 different phases. So I will show just like a linear, like start to finish bolo to begin with. But the best way to think about it is in these 4 distinct phases. And at each phase, there's battles going on. Okay, because not usually just like I knock his hips to the mat and I take the back. I have to first get my angle. I then have to, so I'll go through this phase. The first one is I need to fight to get my angle and actually get a good position for the de la Riva hook. The second phase, I need to get his hips down towards the mat, or at least him to post or hips down to the mat here. Once the hips are on the mat, I want to get into the bolo position. I need to have a few battles here to get my foot across. So this is what I mean by the bolo position, where I've got my right leg in good position here and looking to get a grip ideally around his back, like so. And then from here, this is the last phase, I need to actually look to take the back, okay? And we'll cover, we will cover how to take the back from the bolo in like just common defenses from here. It's not a bolo instructional. You could kind of go on forever on the different counters to counters, but we will deal with some of the postures that they might take as we get into the berimbolo position and how we can look to take the back from there. So once I get through to here, I can look to take the back, which is the last phase of the position. So again, we want to think of it as getting our angle, getting the hips to the mat, getting to the bolo position, and finishing the berimbolo. So I'm just going to teach the berimbolo as a linear sequence of some common occurrences or a common way this will occur. And then we'll get into the more details about each of those phases. So first I want to get my angle. So I'm putting my knee facing up, gripping onto the ankle. I'm pushing backwards, like so, curling my foot down, making sure my knee is vertical. My other foot is just outside the hip, helping to put pressure acrossway. So it's like I'm pushing in and out. I'm like pushing like his body tilting this way. I want to, from here, as I'm pushing, sit up, grip the back of the knee, and come up on my elbow. Once I'm on my elbow, I'm going to start to fall to the side into a deep overhook. Okay. So you can see by sitting up, I can fall, deep overhook, pummel my de la Riva hook, and I'm going to step on the mat. Just turn to see that. Step here. So I push, sit up, grip the leg, deep overhook. As I hook, I'm going to step on the mat, bridge up, kick, and pull. Everything's taking his hip down to the mat. So I step on the ground, bridge, kick. Ed plants his hands on the ground. So most common here, hands are on the ground. This is the posture we're going to work on in this scenario. So he's going to stay up on his hands here. I'm going, no, you keep your hips down here. So I'm going to block that arm by putting my arm across with my forearm blocking, hooking the back of the scapula here, and my forearm blocking the arm. Right, so elbow on one side, hand on the other. I'm going to roll through, thread my foot to hook the far hip, and take my head all the way underneath. I curl back. Notice my knee is free from the hip. Stay up a bit. Yeah, sorry. So my knee is free. I'm hooking close to the ankle here with a back heel just to stop Ed retreating. I'm going to reach to his free knee. I've reached around his back, and I'm going to throw his hips in front of me. So I drag him with this leg. See that? By curling and extending, I'm dragging his hips in. I keep my foot hooked across his far hip or chest, and I use my hand here to assist. Everything throws his hips in front of me and through. Down below my hips. So again, I'm pressuring with my knee and putting inward pressure, putting my foot to the outside of the hip. From here, I sit forward. I'm up on my left elbow. I start to fall to the side. Get a deep hook and hook here. Step to the mat, lift and pull, and force Ed to post on the mat. From here, I'm going to frame underneath this arm and feed my leg across the far hip, hooking the far hip. My hand here, my right hand, is going to reach all the way to the far hip. Do you want to turn a little bit? A bit more so I can see. So I'm reaching my hand all the way to the far hip here. I've got that tension on the leg. Ed's staying up on his hands. I grip the far leg, pull in, and then everything throws his hips lower than mine. So my both legs, especially this leg, this one stays attached. I throw Ed down and through. So it's probably going to be a bit confusing if that's the first time you've seen the bolo. It will make more sense as we go through the phases and I explain a bit more about exactly what we're looking for and the battles, the things that you could miss or that are essential that you get along the way. I'm trying to give like a broad stroke overview of it for now that you can just begin to practice. So I've got pressure against the knee, I'm front on, foot's against the hip. I'm going to sit forward, grip the back of the knee, come up, elbow deep as I get my angle, step as my de la Riva hook, step on the ground, bring Ed's hips to the mat. I'm going to post my hand underneath the back, foot across the far hip, roll through, grab the far side of his hips, his leg, and I'm going to throw him through and take the back.